Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump touting the military successes of Operation Absolute Resolve. This as he speaks to House Republicans ahead of the midterm elections. Attorney General Pam Bondi says President Trump saved countless lives. House Speaker Mike Johnson says the U.S. is the world's last great superpower. The latest on the capture of former dictator Nicolas Maduro. Federal officials moved to pause more than $10 billion in child care and social services funding to 5 states over concerns that benefits went to non-citizens. President Trump called California more corrupt than Minnesota and says an investigation into fraud has begun in the state. We discussed this with a guest panel. Comments by President Trump on taking over Greenland ruffles some feathers in Europe, with leaders backing Denmark and urging collective Arctic security through NATO. A security guard from the Chinese consulate in Los Angeles pepper spray local residents as they gather to celebrate the arrest of Nicolas Maduro.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. President Trump laying out his vision for Venezuela's future, and the president touting the military successes of Operation Absolute Resolve as he speaks to House Republicans ahead of the midterms. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu at the North Lawn of the White House. Mari, good afternoon. What do you have?
Don, good afternoon. Yes, that's right. President Trump this morning at the Trump Kennedy Center delivering remarks to House Republicans ahead of this year's midterm elections. He's saying he's setting the roadmap up for this upcoming year. And this is coming just after Operation Absolute Resolve, the historic mission that resulted in the successful capture of former Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro and his wife. The president shedding more light on the details of that military operation and touting its success. Take a look.
We had a lot of boots on the ground, but it was amazing. And think of it, nobody was killed. And on the other side, a lot of people were killed. Unfortunately, I say that, soldiers, Cubans, mostly Cubans, but many, many killed. And they knew we were coming and they were protected and our guys weren't. You know, our guys are jumping out of helicopters and you're not protected, and they were, but it was so brilliant. The electricity for almost the entire country was boom, turned on. That's when they knew there was a problem. There was no electricity. Caracas said, there's no electricity. It's not the only people with lights were the people that had candles. It was just off. So we sort of got them a little by surprise, but it was brilliant tactically. It was an incredible thing.
This comes as President Trump said on Sunday that he thinks Cuba's communist regime is likely to fall without any U.S. military intervention. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is saying the same thing. And at the same time, President Trump says that he is in the project of nation building, what he describes as fixing up America's neighbors to ensure the U.S.'s safety. He also threatens drug traffickers in Colombia and Mexico, saying that his administration won't allow America's neighbors to be used as proxies for U.S. adversaries. Meanwhile, President Trump is also responding to the global reaction to Operation Absolute Resolve. The Venezuelan diaspora and Venezuelans worldwide have been seen celebrating the capture of Maduro, while President Trump says that there have been protests, for example, in New York, and that he thinks that those are paid. Take a look.
By the way, Venezuela, everyone, they're marching in the streets. They love it, except in New York. I mean, where they find these people? They look like they're all paid. They don't even know what they're talking. When the reporters don't interview them because they know that it's, you know, the press is so anti. It's hard to believe the press can be so anti because it's all common sense. You know, it's not, we're conservative, whatever. Doesn't matter. We're all common sense people.
Meanwhile, speaking to those House Republicans, President Trump eulogizes Congressman Doug LaMalfa, who died today at 65 years old. LaMalfa represented California's first congressional district since 2013 and chaired the Congressional Western Caucus. His death now tightens the already thin House majority, bringing it to 218 Republicans and 213 Democrats. Here's what President Trump had to say about LaMalfa today. Take a look.
I want to express our tremendous sorrow at the loss of a great member, a great member, Congressman Doug LaMalfa, who passed away yesterday, as you probably have heard. And he was the leader of the Western Caucus, a fierce champion on California water issues. He was great on water. He wanted to release the water, he'd scream at him. And a true defender of American children. He was a defender of everybody. And our hearts go out to his wife, Jill, and his entire family.
And another thing President Trump raised in his wide-ranging remarks, Don, is that he'll be meeting with representatives from 14 health insurance companies in, quote, the next few days. This comes after President Trump said just last month that he wants to meet them to urge them to lower their premiums for Americans. Don, back to you.
Okay, Mari, thank you. Now, more on the Venezuela situation. President Trump says the U.S. is not at war with Venezuela, but is working to combat drug trafficking. NTD's Daniel Monahan has the latest from government officials after the surprise capture of former Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro.
President Trump says the United States wants to fix Venezuela before the country can hold its next election. The president did not give a time frame, but projected that the process would take a while.
Attorney General Pam Bondi says the Venezuela operation was a law enforcement function to arrest indicted individuals well within the president's Article 2 powers, speaking on Fox News.
The charges, Maduro and his wife are charged with directing, and it's just an indictment now, they are charged with directing the murders, kidnappings, assaults of anyone who stood in their way and also anyone who tried to stop their drug business.
Bondi says they are also charged with bringing hundreds of tons of cocaine into the U.S. and for working with cartels like the Sinaloa cartel and gangs like Tren de Aragua.
The president saved thousands, countless lives tonight, countless lives with the drug trade. But he also protected Americans from the TDA members who Maduro let into our country, forced into our country, opened his jails, opened the insane asylums to come into our country. Look at Laken Riley. Look at Claritha Daniels. Look at Jocelyn Nungray. All of them killed by TDA members.
Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller says the Venezuelan casualties during the operation were among Maduro's Cuban Guard.
Many don't realize that for years, Maduro stayed in power through an illicit deal with Cuban communists to provide his security because he didn't trust his own people to keep him safe. That is how much he was hated inside of Venezuela.
Miller says by definition, the U.S. is in charge of Venezuela.
We have the United States military stationed outside the country. We set the terms and conditions. We have a complete embargo on all of their oil and their ability to do commerce. The United States is running the country during this transition period. That now, obviously, that doesn't mean that President Trump is setting the bus fare schedule inside the country. Doesn't mean that President Trump is deciding the K-12 curriculum in the country.
Secretary of War Pete Hegseth and Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday briefed lawmakers on the operation. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer criticized the administration's plans, calling them vague and unsatisfying.
I did not receive any assurances that we would not try to do the same thing in other countries.
House Speaker Mike Johnson said the operation did not require prior consent from Congress.
The president used his authority under the law. He did so in a way that caused no casualties on the American side, and got the job done with exquisite intelligence and extreme precision that can only be done by the U.S.
Johnson says the U.S. is the world's last and great superpower.
We stand for justice, and you're going to see that meted out here. It's overdue, and everyone will be safer because this has happened.
Currently, the nation's interim leader is Delcy Rodriguez, who was originally Venezuela's vice president. Venezuela's oil sector holds the world's largest proven reserves at over 300 billion barrels, nearly 1/5 of the global total. President Trump says the U.S. oil industry could get new operations in Venezuela up and running in less than 18 months. In the 1970s, the Venezuelan government nationalized energy assets such as those owned by ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips.
Nationalizations in 2006 and 2007 under Hugo Chavez forced Exxon and Conoco to leave the country entirely. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Venezuelan opposition figure Maria Corina Machado said yesterday she hopes to share her Nobel Peace Prize with President Trump. Speaking on Fox News, Machado says she wishes to thank Trump directly for ousting former dictator Nicolas Maduro.
I dedicated to President Trump because I believed at that point that he deserved it. And a lot of people, most people said it was impossible to achieve what he has just done on Saturday, January 3rd. So if I believed he deserved it on October, imagine now. I think he has proven to the world what he means. I mean, January 3rd will go down in history as the day justice defeated a tyranny.
Machado has vowed to return home quickly. The industrial engineer and mother of 3 escaped from Venezuela in disguise in October to receive the Nobel Peace Prize in Norway. She said she and others believe the transition should move forward. Machado pointed out that the opposition won an election in 2024 by a landslide despite fraudulent conditions. Machado said she has not spoken to Trump since October 10th, when the Nobel Award was announced. The president has said the United States needs to help address Venezuela's problems before any new elections. An unknown trader has won more than $400,000 on Polymarket after betting that Nicolas Maduro would be ousted from power. The anonymous account was created last month. The trader placed bets that would pay off if Maduro was out by the end of January. The mystery trade is likely to attract scrutiny from U.S. lawmakers. Some officials have been pushing for stricter insider trading rules, including a bipartisan effort to potentially ban stock trading among lawmakers. Congressman Richie Torres said he plans to introduce a bill this week. The legislation would bar elected officials and federal employees from placing bets on prediction market platforms. Prediction markets like Polymarket allow users to bet on a wide range of real-world events. Wagers range from outcomes on sports, entertainment, politics, and the economy. And federal officials are moving to halt more than $10 billion in child care and social services funding to 5 states. They're concerned that benefits may have gone to non-citizens. According to the New York Post, citing U.S. officials, the Trump administration plans to freeze funding administered by the Department of Health and Human Services. President Trump posted the article to his Truth Social account. The pause would affect California, Colorado, Illinois, Minnesota, and New York. It includes money from the Child Care Development Fund, temporary assistance for needy families, and the Social Services Block Grant. More than $7 billion in needy families funding alone could be withheld. Officials say letters citing concerns about improper payments were sent to state leaders yesterday. Democratic officials in several states criticized the move, warning it could harm low-income families, while federal agencies continue reviewing alleged misuse of funds. President Trump called California more corrupt than Minnesota and says an investigation into fraud has begun in the state. Meanwhile, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz announced he is not seeking re-election. Joining us to discuss is Mike Leon, host of the Can We Please Talk podcast and director of strategy of Free and Equal Elections Foundation. And we have Tony Kinnett, national correspondent at the Daily Signal and host of the Tony Kinnett Cast radio show and podcast. So first of all, good to see you guys. Happy New Year. And Tony, I'd like to start with you today. Trump didn't provide much details about the post I just read earlier, alleging fraud. What do you think he might be referring to?
Well, I think there are a number of states that have refused to give how the federal dollars in grants, as well as in subsidization of certain programs like Head Start, are being spent in various places that have just decided to refuse any kind of record turnover to the federal government. And that's unacceptable, because when Minnesota refused to turn over how SNAP was being spent, or how certain dollars in Head Start were being spent, or how certain dollars in Medicaid and Medicare were being spent, all of a sudden we found over $18 billion in estimated fraud that was centered around the Somali migrant community. And so if California, which operates in a lot of the same way that Minnesota does, and operating all of these money go everywhere, devil may care programs, and then refuses to turn over the receipts to the federal government, yeah, I mean, I'd say there's a pretty good bet that the president is aware of at least some of the whistleblowing allegations that I've seen over the last couple of years and have participated in myself, that yeah, if Minnesota's failing to turn things over, there's a good chance it might be because of fraudulent behavior.
Okay, Mike, so some examples here of significant fraud coming out of California, like a mother-son duo sentenced to prison last year for fraudulent unemployment insurance claims. Also last year, 4 were indicted in what the FBI called the nation's largest known COVID tax credit scheme. And due to that scheme, the IRS reportedly issued checks totaling $93 million. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, good afternoon to you guys. You know, I don't know about those figures, so I can't obviously fact check if those are real in real time. I know I saw some popular influencers out there across social media posting about some of the malfeasance or some of the fraud that they think that they have uncovered, or what Trump could be alluding to in that Truth Social post. So I can't speak to those numbers specifically, Don. I mean, here's what I will say broadly. There's nobody that's wearing "Let's have some fraud in our state" t-shirts. There's nobody that's supporting fraud. I haven't talked to any Democrats that are on team fraud. So there is a chance for all of us to be behind how do we uncover waste, fraud, and abuse in this country, whether it be at the state level, whether it be at local municipality levels, whether it be at the federal level. Like, we should all be on the same side of wanting to do that. To Tony's point, the federal government, especially if it's a program that directly gets federal funding for a state, if they're not reporting and giving the receipts, the federal government's within its right to shut off the valve for that. Like, there's no disputing that. That's not a Republican or Democrat talking point. That's a statistical thing. That's like how it works. So there's no pushback there from that. But what I will say more broadly is I think we tend to chase what the president loves to push out on social media, and people love to run with it, and then they've got to apologize later, which they never do. And then we got to figure out where these numbers are coming from, and we don't have a clear indication, because all he said is that there's fraud in California. Well, I mean, I could say there's fraud in Louisiana. We don't know that. We'd have to prove that, right? So how do we get to that state is where I'd like to see what happens in the subsequent months. But everything else is, like I said, we're all on the side of tackling waste, fraud, and abuse, whether it happens in a red state or a blue state. Let's tackle it head on, and let's have the federal government do its investigations, or independent agencies that do these investigations.
So, Tony, the National Association State Budget Officers reports that California fiscal 2026 budget is over $300 billion, and that's among the largest spending plans in the country. Mike says he doesn't see anybody wearing supporting fraud T-shirts. Can you talk to us about how California has handled oversight, auditing, and enforcement across its programs?
Well, I think that at first I'll say that I agree with Mike that there are very few in public that are, at least in an official capacity, saying, yeah, they all claim to be against fraud, unless, of course, we look at the individuals who've spoken up in Minnesota. That the girl who said, well, we all know fraud is bad, and then was so terrified of the men looking at her in the crowd that she stopped speaking. And then when you look at the other influencers that have been caught saying, well, it was actually, the fraud was good, it's just bad that they got caught. When it comes to Tim Walz and Democrat officials or California officials refusing to turn over information, going after whistleblowers, we've seen this in both Minnesota and California, Connecticut, as well as Virginia, for that matter, both kind of in the purple, not just the blue, in Virginia's case. And I think that it's important here that we ensure that before we say, well, everyone's really against fraud, there are states that are refusing to turn over information under the guise of, well, we're protecting immigrants. You know, we're really just protecting people. And then when the instances are looked into why they're not turning over information regarding SNAP or Medicaid or these major grant programs, often it is because there wasn't any vetting done. They were simply throwing out money like Johnny Appleseed. And that is what I expect to see in California here. Why? Because we've seen it before. We've seen it in regard to the FEMA disbursement of funds in the last 20 years regarding several wildfire situations. We've seen it regarding the bribery of certain county and state officials. We saw it in Kamala Harris' tenure, in which money was moved around and certain prosecutions shifted slightly. It's been a very not so hidden truth that California struggles with honesty when it comes to the disbursement. Like you said, the massive amount of money that California is spending. To be fair, California also does produce a lot of money. So bigger state spending budget from bigger state revenue created. Again, turn over the records. We won't have any issue here.
Okay, so Mike, let's look at action here. Tony says you don't see anybody supporting fraud in public, but when fraud is suspected or found, for example, in California programs, does the state tend to move quickly in terms of enforcement?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, if you look at what's happened in Minnesota, just as an outlier, an example, the reporting from the Minnesota Tribune that happened years ago under the Biden Department of Justice and now has continued with obviously Trump's Department of Justice. Like if you just look at the investigations and the reporting that was done at the local level from Minnesota Public Radio about this, Amy Bach and all of the stuff with that program, like how fast has it moved? It's moved at a glacial pace because of the court systems, right? So California is in line with some of those other states that, tend to move very slowly. And I think also as a public, we tend to forget about some of these stories when the investigation starts. We tend to helicopter in on these things. We don't live, Tony and I, none of us live in California or Minnesota. So we don't tend to follow it as well as the local folks that are staying on top of it. So I think that's the other thing that's kind of, made me a little bit upset about the coverage. You got a lot of influence, not even, forget the Nick Shirley thing for a second. Just anybody who comes into the state of Minnesota and says nobody's doing the job here of reporting on this is just not true, because you don't read the Minnesota Star Tribune, you don't listen to Minnesota Public Radio. They've been covering these stories. So in terms of the enforcement, though, Don, I would like to see something net out of this, but the public is going to have to wait. I want to go back to something just real quick, though, that Tony said about red states, blue states. And this is not a whataboutism game, so I don't want anybody to take this as a Democratic talking point. A few years ago, we had a huge welfare scandal, which I covered on my show, involving Brett Favre in the state of Mississippi and TANF funds and funds that were illegally used there under a previous governor, right? This happens all the time. Like, and again, this is back to the fraud. We're not wearing fraud T-shirts. Like, just because, Brett Favre's wearing Wrangler jeans and a MAGA T-shirt doesn't mean that he should be investigated less than somebody from a blue state. Like, I'm on team, let's investigate both. So that's kind of where I stand. I want people to understand that. And I want these investigations to take their time. I don't want to chase, I don't want the dog to chase the car because the president of the United States tweeted, California's bad and there's tons of fraud. I mean, I don't know any of that. We don't know any of that. We need to see how the investigation processes tend to play out. So I'm on the side of let's let these investigation processes play out. It doesn't matter about R&D next to the name. Like, let's prosecute those that are committing fraud.
Okay, Tony, your response, and we would like to hear your reactions as well to Governor Tim Walz not seeking re-election.
I mean, Governor Tim Walz not seeking re-election is a very awkward admission of guilt. I mean, it's just very strange to after, again, he spent years, which the Minnesota Star Tribune did not cover, choosing not to, the Minneapolis Star Tribune not covering the going after the legislative auditor that Tim Walz did, undercutting whistleblower reports, which Tim Walz did. And yes, early 10 years ago, Star Tribune and then Fox 5 covering some of these daycare centers with fraudulent activity, covering some of the rampant Somali migrant fraud, that kind of a cultural behavior coming over to the United States. That's obviously a serious issue. But as far as Governor Tim Walz coming out and saying, well, actually, this is all Trump's fault. No, this is a man who was almost one heartbeat away from the presidency. I've had issues with him since he lied about his military service, since he lied about what he did in his military service, since he lied about what he did as a coach, since he lied about what he did as governor. Now he's saying he's firing people. He hasn't. There have been people who have resigned without any communication from the governor's office. He's a liar. And this is an issue that I have relating to some of the people who've defended him most fiercely. Gavin Newsom. When there's an individual in the Republican Party who commits a serious amount of fraud, he's expelled from Congress, he's made fun of, and then he's sent to prison out in New York. But if we're looking at some of the individuals who have attempted to find censorship for fraudulent behavior on the left side of the aisle, they get the defensive welcome party. And I'm just making the case that I saw a lot of Republicans happy to throw Matt Gaetz under the bus, happy to throw George Santos under the bus, happy to throw Brett Favre under the bus for the Mississippi fraud scandal. But all of a sudden, here we are looking at California, and I can't help but notice a little of the, well, let's not get too hasty here. No, Gavin Newsom could have avoided this months ago. Why not turn over the documents? Just turn it over, Mr. Innocent.
Okay, Mike, your thoughts. And Walt said the situation required his full attention rather than doing political campaign.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would tell to Tony on the Matt Gaetz, George Santos. It took a while for that bus to roll over those people, is what I would say. I want to leave it there, though, because I do agree with your overarching point. But in terms of Tim Walz not seeking re-election, I don't necessarily go as far as what Tony's saying in terms of that it's an admission of guilt. I will say that I think the governor's seeing the writing on the wall. I don't think he has the backing of like local leaders. You already saw Amy Klobuchar kind of throw her hat in there and say she's going to run for governor and try to clean things up or whatever it was that she alluded to the other day. So I think that Walz realized that his political shine and the luster of, being kind of this 4-week, catch a rising star, shooting star, whatever it was of the Democratic Party, to where he is now, just, 14 months later, are two different things. And I think he kind of saw the writing on the wall with respect to that, Don. And he's like, not going to seek re-election. I'm not going to go through this because, again, we're still under investigation. These are still things that are happening under my administration. And I don't think he would win a general election. I think he knows that. And I think I think his team knew that. And I think he got some good advice with respect to that, not the other stuff, but he got good advice with respect to that and said, you know what, I'm going to call it out and I'm not going to run for re-election in 2026. I think it's a smart thing for him to do because I think the luster of him in Democratic politics has kind of gone away. And I don't think this is somebody that, would have gone for the general election or presidency in 2028 because of different things that he has had happen in his own state that is happening under his own administration that's in the public spotlight. And people are like, you can't even get your own state in order. How could you run the United States of America?
Okay, well, the chair of the DNC is a Minnesotan. And I think just as a question, Mike, because I know you and I often talk to people inside the DNC side of things. Do you think that we saw the chair of the DNC come out and say, hey, Walz, you're embarrassing us. You got to knock this off right now?
That's a great point. Those are things that I wish more of the public got to see a little bit of more of these type of conversations that happen behind closed doors. That could be it, Tony, to be honest with you. That could be it. I also think, like I said, the approval numbers, if you've watched, as I have, if I started to read more, like you mentioned, Fox, Minneapolis, Minnesota Star Tribune, NPR over there, not NPR for Minnesota. But as I've watched more of the coverage over there, this has really driven the negative perception about him publicly that I think, as we think voters tend to be very, issue driven, but also singularly focused on the present moment. I don't think he could have carried it towards later on in the year. I think it's something that stigma wise, it would have carried with him. And I just think he got advice internally, but the DNC thing is a very good angle as well.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you, Don.
You're asking the questions now, right?
I'm so sorry. I was just so curious. Mike is such a gem of information.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So I wanted to ask you this, Tony. You said earlier that this is perhaps an admission of guilt on Walz's part. Mike says he doesn't think exactly in that way. So do you think this fraud is more due to a lack of enforcement, or perhaps it's how the programs were designed in the first place? What do you think?
Very glad to clarify, because I don't just want to put on the tinfoil hat and say, he's guilty of treason. It's Benedict Arnold. No, I don't think so. But there are definite records that show he went after the independent legislative auditor. So we have a state auditor here in Indiana, whereas in Minnesota, that's more of a legislative appointed position. And he went after her. I mean, he threw away reports. That violates the intent, or the section regarding intent to defraud the United States because federal funds were involved, as well as the obstruction of justice issues. And if it can be shown that Tim Walz essentially went after her at all relating to anything that had a federal dollar attached to it, that's a huge issue. And that's what everyone's asking now. You actually have taken a concerted status to say anyone who questions me is a white supremacist. And that's been his entire mode of operation for the last year. So if he's going to play that now, I think it's less I don't have the momentum. It's that he realizes that it's going to be a very ugly couple of months given some of the stuff that's likely to come out. Now, Klobuchar being the replacement, I mean, far be it for me to suggest that the lady who beats and berates her staff should probably be the next governor of Minnesota, but I don't know, maybe that's better than rampant federal fraud. What a choice.
Okay, Mike, final thoughts from you.
I can't piggyback on the two choices right there, because we saw what happened with Katie Porter in California and how she treats her staff, and now you couldn't find her on a milk carton for the governor's race. So final thought is really about Tim Walz, in American politics. We'll see you later. But again, I think the overarching takeaway for all of us should be nobody is team waste, fraud, and abuse, Don. Don't make the shirts, Don. Nobody's wearing that. We are all on the side of uncovering waste, fraud, and abuse. If it happens to be an R next to the name, you should be as vociferous as the person that has the D next to their name.
Well, all right. I got to cancel those orders then, Mike. Just joking. Okay, a great conversation to start off the new year. Thank you both for speaking with us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
$10 billion in funds frozen by the Trump administration for child care and social services. A Health and Human Services official said this will impact 5 Democratic-led states: California, Colorado, Illinois, Minnesota, and New York. HHS said the cuts will be to the Social Services Block Grant, the Child Care Development Fund, and the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program. This program cash assistance to households. HHS spokesperson Andrew Nixon accused Democratic-led states of being complicit in fraud and said the Trump administration is ensuring federal taxpayer dollars are being used for legitimate purposes. Did the U.S. violate the UN Charter, specifically Article 2, Section 4, that countries must refrain from using military force against other countries? We talked to a legal analyst after this break. Stay tuned.
Buying and selling a home can be really hard these days. That's why who you work with matters. I recently helped a couple buy their dream home even before selling their current one. They were both very busy and didn't have time to sell the traditional way. HomeLight's Buy Before You Sell program was a game changer. They were able to buy and sell on their own schedule. It was so easy and they were thrilled. See how you can buy before you sell at homelight.com today.
With Select Specs £6 specs, you can get 10 pairs of prescription glasses for just £60. That includes frames, prescription lenses, and delivery free to your door. And what makes this really special is each pair can have a different prescription. So it's glasses for everyone. SelectSpecs.com/£6. 10 frames, all with prescription lenses and anti-scratch coating for just £60. You don't get that on the high street. Right now you can save an extra 5% with offer code CG5OFF.
Hi, my name is Brady. When I was born, my parents thought everything was okay. My mom and dad were so excited to take me home.
I still get goosebumps telling this story. Several days in, his skin started to become very cold and clammy. We noticed that he had become blue around his mouth, and something was just very off.
We packed up as fast as we could. Brady stopped breathing twice on the way to the pediatrician. And that was one of the #1 things that just haunts me to this day.
I was born with a congenital heart defect called aortic coarctation. If my parents waited just 1 more hour to drive me to the hospital, I would not be here today. But thanks to research funded by the American Heart Association, I had heart surgery that saved my life. But not every kid is as lucky as me, which is why we need your help. Just call the number on the screen or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help. Get people trained in CPR. Get more hospitals certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. And help fund the next medical breakthroughs to help save kids like me.
When you donate to the American Heart Association, you're helping save lives like my son. And now my son is happy and healthy, thanks to the support of people like you.
When you call with your $19 a month, you'll get this really cool t-shirt as a thank you. Many children die from congenital heart defects. I can't wait to grow up to become a heart surgeon and fix babies' hearts, but until then, I'll keep helping the American Heart Association. So please join me. Just call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org to become a monthly donor and help save lives.
Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro pleaded not guilty yesterday after being captured in his home country. Joining us to discuss is Jonathan Houlihan, a commander in the U.S. Navy's Judge Advocate General's Corps Reserves. He's a veteran of both the Iraq and Afghanistan combat theaters and a designated expert in international national security and operational law. Good afternoon, Jonathan. So can I ask you, we know there were U.S. military forces in Venezuela. There were boots on the ground. Did Trump need congressional approval for this?
Absolutely not. President Trump has Article 2 authority to conduct these type of operations. Even under the War Powers Act, he can notify members of Congress on the HISI and the SISI in the Senate Arms Committee after the operation took place. So in this case, absolutely not. Article 2 authority is sufficient, and under his duty as commander-in-chief and chief executive to protect Americans. And the fact that it was such an interagency joint force, you had Department of Justice officials on scene. It was really pursued as a criminal matter because as the indictments from New York in 2020 showed that the conspiracy to commit narco-terrorism, providing weapons and cocaine through the FARC and the other narco-terrorism organizations. So absolutely not. He didn't require congressional authority for such a limited joint operation.
Okay, Jonathan, respond to this. Critics of President Trump's move point to the UN Charter. Did the U.S. violate the UN Charter, specifically Article 2, Section 4, that countries must refrain from using military force against other countries?
Well, with all due respect to the UN, I mean, I would submit to you that Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution trumps, no pun intended, the UN Charter, Article 2. So they can make those arguments, they can make those diplomatic kind of claims, but at the end of the day, Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution rules for American interest to make sure that Americans are protected from these drug running operations, working with the cartels, running drugs, getting around sanctioned activity, providing oil to sanctioned countries. All of those things to protect American interests trump any kind of Article 2 of the UN Charter.
Okay, so the administration says this is a targeted capture of an indicted criminal. We've heard that many times over the days. But some argue because Trump explicitly talked about taking over the oil sector in Venezuela and running the country, does that make it a regime change operation?
Well, certainly, if you look at what Secretary of State Rubio said and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Kane said, you know, that's more the official position as far as it was a criminal indictment. They went after Maduro because of his relationships with the FARC and these other narco-terrorist organizations, and he wasn't a recognized head of state. 50-plus countries, including the United States, did not recognize Maduro as the head of Venezuela because of the election irregularities and all of those other things that occurred. So he doesn't have this head of state immunity that he would allege under international law. So at the end of the day, the official position and how the operation actually occurred, Department of Justice, you had law enforcement officials on scene. So President Trump is handling the diplomatic efforts on the backside. Of course, there's going to be a ripple effect within Venezuela. Of course, the oil and gas industry needs to get repatriated to the world because of such problems they've seen with this socialist communist regime in place. So, of course, that is just a head of state trying to clean up the matter on the backside and really make these diplomatic talking points. But at the end of the day, the operation was done with a joint force, with criminal indictment in mind, and he was handed over immediately to law enforcement, and he was already made an appearance in court. So it's a legal process, not a military process, not a nation-building process.
All right, understood. Your comments as well on arguments that a country can't just seize leaders they deem as criminals. Maybe this could be classified as a concern as well, but they can't do that. Otherwise, any country could just do this.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly understand the argument. Being from Texas, having Santa Ana was seized on the battlefield from Sam Houston, again, Republic of Texas, not the United States. But these type of things have happened. Noriega in 1989 in Panama, very similar case. It's been talked about all over television, but a very similar case where a head of state can be taken, especially when they're not recognized as a head of state. By, like I said, the United States and 50-plus countries did not recognize Maduro as the head of state because of the election irregularities. So at the end of the day, he was a dictator, a criminal dictator that was taken for a law enforcement purpose because of the criminal indictments that existed since 2020, given the conspiracy to commit narco-terrorism, the weapons charges, the shipments of cocaine to Europe. I mean, the Europeans should be thanking us because we've cut off this large-scale drug operation that has been heading into Europe for years. But of course, they're going to make these kind of diplomatic talking points and and say the United States had no right. But there's long precedent. There was a roadmap with Noriega. Even before that, in the Philippines, the United States conducted this type of operation. And there's strong legal precedent that any kind of head of state immunity, any kind of Article 2 under the UN, all of those things, they're not, in my opinion, it's not going to win the day for Maduro. I think he's going to be prosecuted, and I think he's going to spend the rest of his life in federal prison.
Okay, I just want to follow up on that. Are court proceedings and law any different when prosecuting a head of state of a foreign country like Maduro in the U.S.?
Well, I mean, that's the benefit of the United States. I mean, everybody should be treated equally. So, you know, he's going to have a right to a defense. There's going to be obviously increased security measures. You know, if you look at our own Department of Justice in the last administration, I mean, they prosecuted our former head of state, now head of state again. So it shouldn't be any different. There's going to be a lot more media. There's going to be a lot more media appearances, a lot more discussion and analysis. But at the end of the day, the process is the process. And we hope that it's the same process. Everybody has due process rights to make a defense. And we'll see where it goes.
Okay, you mentioned just now earlier in passing that he may be serving jail time. I just want to ask a final question on that. What happens if he's found guilty? What are the legal consequences for him? And what about his wife, Celia Flores?
Well, that's a good question. So his wife is obviously, they grabbed her too. So she's a conspirator. She's a in some manner, she's got evidence, a co-accomplice. So she probably will face the same kind of charges, or at least turn state's evidence against him to get a better deal. But at the end of the day, these charges are significant. And if you look at Noriega, I mean, I think he got 40 years, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but 30 or 40 years is what he was charged. He was released, and then he was under a separate criminal charge in France when he died in a Panamanian prison. So I expect him to spend the rest of his life in jail if he's found guilty and if these charges are proved. But I'm sure it will be a supermax, high security prison wherever he ends up if he's found guilty again. But the process is going to remain the same, other than, you know, obviously it's a bigger deal when you have a former head of state in a U.S. prison. But at the end of the day, the process is going to be followed.
Well, all right, Jonathan, it's always good to hear your insight. Thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Don. Appreciate it.
Chinese immigrants gathered outside the Chinese consulate in Los Angeles on Sunday to celebrate the arrest of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro. But the gathering took an unexpected turn when a security guard from the Chinese consulate responded aggressively. Here's the story.
Local residents gathered outside the Chinese consulate in Los Angeles on Sunday to celebrate the arrest of Nicolas Maduro. But tensions began to rise after a security guard from the Chinese consulate began threatening participants with pepper spray. According to the event organizer, towards the end of the event, the security guard followed through with his threats and began pepper spraying the crowd. 8 people were injured, with 3 people taken to the hospital for treatment. The security guard was later arrested by the police at the scene. Records from the Inmate Information Center shows he is currently facing a felony-level charge. Meanwhile, following Nicolas Maduro's appearance at a federal courthouse on Monday, some of the Chinese demonstrators said the news brought a mix of emotions.
As soon as the news broke, I shared it with my friends online. What shocked me was how many people inside the system wanted to like my post. My Venezuelan friends told me that when people fight for freedom back home, the government shoots them. That immediately made me think of China's June 4th.
Several attendees said they hope China's Communist Party, which has repeatedly promoted a, quote, shared future partnership with Venezuela, will ultimately face the same fate. Li Jianjie, the event organizer, said, though, that their fight is far from over.
Our suffering hasn't ended. We hope that one day, like Venezuela, we can also bring an end to authoritarian rule. I urge the U.S. and the international community, just as you once helped the Venezuelan people push back against Maduro's regime, please also support the Chinese people. I believe one day the Communist Party will be overthrown, because sooner or later it will collapse.
Comments by President Trump about potentially taking control of Greenland are drawing reactions from Europe. Leaders from several major European powers issued a joint statement today backing Denmark and Greenland and saying the Arctic island belongs to its people. The leaders stressed that decisions concerning Greenland should be made by Denmark and Greenland alone. They also said Arctic security must be handled collectively with NATO allies, including the United States. They said European nations have increased their military presence, activities, and investments in the region to deter adversaries. President Trump has repeatedly said the U.S. needs Greenland for national security purposes. Its strategic position between Europe and North America makes it critical to U.S. ballistic missile defense. And its mineral resources are seen as key to reducing reliance on Chinese exports. Greenland's prime minister said yesterday that his government wants stronger ties with Washington, adding residents should not fear an imminent U.S. takeover. A hotel cancellation involving ICE agents in Minnesota has drawn the attention of the Department of Homeland Security. We have the agents' response, agencies.
I saw war, bombing, shooting. I'm worried for my future.
كتير رعب وطبعا هلا يعني أنا بحس بالرعب الكبير بدنا بس نعيش بأمان.
Conflict is raging across the world, and millions of children's lives are being devastated by war, hunger, disease, and poverty. We urgently need your help to reach children in crisis. Please call or go online to give just $10 a month, only 33 cents a day. We need 1,000 new monthly donors this month to help children in crisis around the world and right here at home. You can help us provide food, essentials, and life-saving medical care to children in the most need.
يعني بدنا نعيش زي كل الأطفال بدنا نعيش بحرية وأمان.
In the darkest times, children suffer the most. You can help by calling right now and giving just $10 a month. All we need are 1,000 monthly donors. Please call or go online now. Your donation today can help secure additional grants, which can multiply the impact of your support up to 10 times. And when you call with your credit card, we will send you the Save the Children tote bag as a thank you for your support.
وعيت عن هاي الدنيا القصف والنزوح والخيمة. أتمنى نعود على بلادنا شايفين لك إنه هذا مستحيل.
Your small monthly donation of just $10 could be the reason a child in crisis survives. Show them they're not alone. Please call or go online to givetosave.org to help save lives.
First time that when I see him, a lot of stuff came into my mind because I wasn't prepared at all. I know the first 3 months of his life were really important, and I wanted to be there all the time for him. First time he was like, "Daddy, Daddy." That was one of his first words. He grew up so quick. He just surprised me every day. He's really smart. I really think he can be an astronaut, president. But I must support him for wherever he wants to be. Whether he want to be a photographer, musician, whatever. As a father, I guess you don't focus on you. I put himself first. That's what a dad does.
In Minnesota, where a hotel cancellation involving ICE agents is drawing sharp criticism from the Department of Homeland Security. The cancellation in a Minneapolis suburb prompted an apology from Hilton and local operators. Here's more on this story.
Homeland Security said the Hilton's Hampton Inn in Lakeville canceled several of its agents' reservations after they were booked with official government emails. This prompted DHS to accuse Hilton of being part of what it called a coordinated campaign against immigration enforcement. The department released a redacted email from a hotel employee confirming the cancellations, which said, "We are not allowing any ICE or immigration agents to stay at our property. If you are with DHS or immigration, let us know, as we will have to cancel your reservation. Hilton responded by saying the hotel is independently owned and the actions did not reflect the company's values. The local operator, Everpeak Hospitality, also issued an apology and said it is working to accommodate the affected agents. The incident comes as ICE significantly expands enforcement operations nationwide. The agency announced Monday that it hired more than 12,000 officers and agents in less than a year as part of an unprecedented recruitment campaign. According to ICE, that number represents a 120% increase in manpower. Officials say those additional agents are already being deployed across the country. Florida is one of the states reporting major immigration enforcement activity. Governor Ron DeSantis highlighted the state's arrest numbers, saying Florida had turned over tens of thousands of illegal immigrants to the Department of Homeland Security.
So there's no other state that has been able to do anything approaching what the state of Florida has been able to do. And Operation Tidal Wave's over 10,000, but then if you look at the other efforts of the counties combined, we're close to 20,000 arrests that have occurred just in the last year.
Of those people, DeSantis says 63% had prior arrests or convictions, including violent offenses and sex offenses.
The U.S. Postal Service says it will phase out non-domiciled commercial drivers who have not been vetted by the agency. The Postal Service said yesterday it intends to tighten safety requirements nationwide. The chairwoman of the Postal Service says the move is necessary to protect employees, customers, and the public. The announcement follows the Transportation Department's emergency regulation to restrict commercial driver's licenses to immigrants or non-U.S. citizens. The move came after a fatal crash in Florida and a government audit. The U.S. Post Office moves 55,000 truckloads per day. It says it will monitor contractor performance and safety data to reduce accidents across its network. A man accused of vandalizing Vice President J.D. Vance's Cincinnati home is now facing multiple federal charges. William DeFore is scheduled to appear in federal court today. Federal prosecutors say the 26-year-old was arrested just after midnight yesterday after Secret Service agents saw him breach the perimeter of the protected residence with an armed hammer. Authorities say DeFore ignored repeated commands, damaged multiple windows, and caused more than $28,000 in damage to federally owned security equipment. DeFore allegedly tried to flee and was detained by Secret Service agents and Cincinnati police. He is charged with damaging government property, violent conduct on restricted grounds, and assaulting federal officers' offenses that together carry potential penalties of up to 20 years in prison. Court records show DeFore is the son of a prominent Cincinnati physician. Federal donation records indicate the family previously contributed to Democratic candidates, including Kamala Harris. The CDC has made major changes to its vaccine recommendations, more closely aligning with the international norms in other developed countries. NTD's Melina Weisskopf brings us details from Washington, D.C.
The CDC is narrowing the number of shots recommended to all children. The vaccines dropped from the broadly recommended schedule include influenza, rotavirus, hepatitis A, and the vaccine to address meningitis. This is in addition to the CDC's previously dropped recommendations for vaccines for hepatitis B and COVID-19. While the new schedule is meant to address the general public, the CDC still keeps some recommendations in place for high-risk groups. Vaccines that are removed from the updated schedule will still be available for parents and covered through federal insurance programs like the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid. So the goal here is not to make vaccines less available, but to give parents more transparency and control over whether or not to let their children get them in the first place. Though some health experts are concerned about the broader impacts of these new guidelines, like if it will create confusion or what it could mean for public health.
Could have been done, perhaps, is a more public review so that people can understand what the changes are and whether they agree with them or not.
From another point of view, one California-based pediatrician, Dr. Joel Warsh, clarified to the Epoch Times that, quote, reducing universal recommendations doesn't mean vaccines are being banned or declared unsafe. It means the CDC is finally acknowledging that not every vaccine has the same risk-benefit profile for every child. The Health and Human Services Deputy Secretary defended his new schedule, expressing that it's questionable that the number of shots recommended has only increased over the years.
They've gone from 23 doses for 7 diseases in 1980 to more than 80 doses for 18 diseases now. That's a huge number of vaccines. Many parents are concerned that they're injecting their young, innocent children with a lot of medicines. They're not sure about the risks and benefits of all these.
The CDC consulted with Denmark, Germany, Japan, and vaccine scientists at the CDC and FDA to make the changes. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
The National Rifle Association is suing its own nonprofit arm. The suit alleges the foundation is being used by disgruntled former board members attempting to take control of the NRA. The foundation was formed in 1990 to fund the gun rights organization's educational and charitable work. The lawsuit accuses foundation leadership of trademark infringement, unfair competition, trademark dilution, and unauthorized diversion of charitable assets, among other charges. According to court documents, the group alleged ongoing and threatened misuse of approximately $160 million raised by or with the NRA. A one-month countdown appeared on a screen in Milan today. It's signaling the final month ahead of the opening of the 2026 Olympic Games on February 6th. Residents and tourists in Milan commented on this final phase of preparations in the city. They voiced concerns about whether or not everything was ready and showed optimism that the enormous amount of work can be finished in time.
No, it's not quite ready yet. On the surface, everything looks great, but in reality, there are still many problems and many things that are being hidden.
We'll have to see once the games will actually take place. From what they say, it seems that I think we'll definitely manage to be ready. We've never failed before.
Oh, I think that's always the way with the Olympics. It's never ready until the last minute, but they always kind of pull it together. So I'm sure they'll do the same.
Italian provinces and more than 300 municipalities are in the build-up to the Winter Olympics. The Games will be co-hosted by Milan and the Dolomite Resort of Cortina d'Ampezzo. They will run from February 6th through 22nd, with the Paralympics to follow in March as well. Confronting former socialist leader Nicolas Maduro after years of oppression, we hear from a man who interrupted Maduro's arraignment to send him a message. Stay with us.